NASCAR's racing at Bowman Gray. NASCAR also has an offer on the table for the charters for the teams, and Toyota might have their engine problems figured out. That and much more coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing good today. Got a lot to cover, so let's jump right into it, starting with the charter agreement offer that is on the table. This via Jayski via the Sports Business Journal. NASCAR Holdings sent its Cup Series teams a new counteroffer in recent days in charter system talks, but some teams are once again viewing the latest proposal as one they are unlikely to sign, sources say. Teams in NASCAR are said to have largely agreed to the split of the money on the next TV deals, which appears to signal at least some degree of progress that has been made in recent months. But sides have been unable to bridge disagreements in other areas. Teams in NASCAR are independent contractors and don't own equity in NASCAR Holdings, but the sides have ideally been hoping to sign a deal that would result in them working more closely together than ever in the next term, such as jointly selling sponsorship. So stop me if you've heard this one before, but they said that they are basically agreed on the TV money and the structure and how much money the teams will get from TV and all that. So they do at least have that hurdle out of the way, and at least according to this article, that part of the negotiation is off the table. It's basically done. It's in ink. That part they've agreed on. However, the charters still seem to be the sticking point for this, and basically what they want is when NASCAR negotiates a sponsorship deal with, say, Toyota, Monster Energy, Nationwide, whoever, Geico, throw them out there. Basically sponsors that sponsor the sport of NASCAR, things like that. What the team owners want is some of that money from that. They want basically a split, basically how NASCAR and the tracks have a split. The team owners want a split in that as well. So basically, they basically, to sum it all up, they want a piece of NASCAR as a business. That way we're all working 1/3 basically together to grow the sport together. That's what the teams keep harping on about. That's what the teams want. And that's the part of the business that NASCAR doesn't want to give up. They're fighting tooth and nail for it, and this seems to be the holdup that's been the holdup the entire time. So basically what this creates is a situation as it currently stands where teams are private contractors and they're going after sponsors, but the sponsors they're going after are the same sponsors that NASCAR is going after. If they could get this deal hammered out and figured out where the sponsorship money that NASCAR gets also goes to the teams to help them out with costs, you wouldn't have an issue necessarily where you have teams competing with NASCAR for sponsors, because as it is, they're competing with each other for sponsors, and if you want to throw it from the team's perspective, there have been instances in the team's point of view where NASCAR has stolen sponsors from a team. So that gets rid of that issue. Whereas in the past, that wasn't an issue. If you go to the late 90s to the mid-2000s, that wasn't an issue. Teams didn't care if a sponsor got stolen from them because there was just so much money flowing into the sport. After 2008, with the economic crisis that happened then, the sport is different from that now. The money is not flowing in like it was previously before that. So now NASCAR stealing sponsors from the team becomes more important from the team's perspective, stealing sponsors from them. How can you steal a sponsor? That's all up for debate. But it becomes a bigger deal, and that's why the teams want an equitable split, basically, in their opinion, of the sponsor money coming into NASCAR. They get some of that sponsor money when NASCAR signs a sponsor for the sport. So from what I gather, that seems to be the holdup here. The article continued, earlier this week before the latest offer was transmitted, some industry executives said certain teams were optimistic that the new offer would be good enough for them to agree to, but today 4 people familiar with the team's thinking said that at least some of the teams are dissatisfied once again, and key terms in the latest offer suggesting that negotiations are likely to continue late into the summer. SBJ could not establish whether displeasure with the latest offer was unanimous across all 15 teams. The offer from NASCAR is for 7 years with a 7-year option after that, concurrent with the fresh media agreements from 2025 through 2031. So the offer on the table is for 7 years, potentially for 14 years with the option. However, as it said in that same piece, it looks like some teams are happy with it, some teams are not happy with it, and then he said he spoke to 4 people familiar with the team's thought process, and he's betting that the teams probably aren't happy with it. So definitely some more work to go, but there is at least an offer on the table, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. This via Sirius XM satellite. We do in fact have a trend and an issue with the valve springs. We did have an aha moment because of that failure. David Wilson there referring to Martin Truex Jr.'s recent engine failure, where we've seen the Toyotas plagued for the last few weeks with several engine failures. It appears to be in the valve train. They have figured out whatever the problem with that particular valve train component is, whether they haven't been super specific as to what it is, but they have at least figured it out. So going forward, Toyota fans, rest assured the reliability that you have known with those Joe Gibbs racing motors previous years looks like it will be back to the standard that you are used to going on from here. So hopefully the Toyota engine issue is figured out from here on out. Bowman Gray Stadium opened in 1937. It is the oldest paved racetrack on the NASCAR schedule, a quarter-mile racetrack, and it was one of the first paved, I should say the oldest first paved, longest-running weekly series track for NASCAR. Well, it will be holding the Clash this year for the NASCAR Cup Series, the preseason race, basically, for the Cup Series. So that'll be the first race. The Cup Series has run there since 1971, 54 years since the Cup Series cars have been on that track, so definitely a big deal there. Previous winners that are still attached to the sport would be Richard Petty. Richard Petty's won there. He's still attached to the sport with the 43 and Legacy Motor Club, and the Wood brothers have also won there. The 21 car is still attached to the sport, and Josh Berry being a short track ace, he would be one to watch over there at Bowman Gray, but he is not necessarily the only one that in the Cup Series now that has raced there, because there are other drivers that have driven on that track that now race in the Cup Series, including Alex Bowman, William Byron, Chase Elliott, Justin Haley, Corey LaJoie, Kyle Larson, Ryan Preece, Daniel Suarez, Bubba Wallace. And on top of that, FS1 is going to have a documentary about the Madhouse and how they are going to structure it going forward to get this thing going for the Clash. It does seat 1,700 plus 2,000 with standing room capacity, so 19,000 will be available. You have to basically go and get into a lottery, I guess, to get the tickets on NASCAR.com or whatever. So if you're interested in it, make sure you go ahead and get in that lottery now so you can possibly get tickets. With 3 wins and 78 top 10s and 440 starts, AJ Allmendinger will be coming back to the Cup Series. He's going to drive the number 16 full-time for Kaulig next season. And what's important about that is 2 of those 3 wins have come in the last 4 seasons. Only one of those last 4 seasons was a full-time season. The other 3 seasons have been a partial schedule for AJ Allmendinger in the Cup Series. So that is good news for Kaulig. Glad they figured out the sponsorship stuff going forward for AJ in the 16 over there, and they're back to chasing victories. Whatever their thing was, hunting wins or whatever it was. I can't remember. They had some slogan about wins, so they're back to hunting wins. I think that was it. So good news for them over there, but it does open questions now about the 31 car. Is Daniel Hemric going to stay in that 31 car? Does Daniel Hemric do what AJ Allmendinger did and go back to the Xfinity Series for maybe a season or 2? And if that happens, no matter what happens or does Hemric have another ride in the Cup Series? We don't know. But no matter what, the question is, with the 31 car, if Hemric doesn't return, like some rumors have suggested, who will replace him? The 2 hottest names on that particular list are, 1, SVG. That seems to be the favorite for everybody. Everybody thinks SVG is going to go over there and run for Trackhouse next year with Suarez, basically be a satellite team with Suarez like they did with the 71 this year over there at Spire with Suarez, and of course Ross Chastain over there at regular Trackhouse. So might be the one in the 31 car. The other name that keeps getting thrown around, if it's not going to be SVG, would of course be Austin Hill. Does RCR, because RCR shares a campus with Kaulig, or Kaulig shares a campus with RCR, depending on how you look at it. Is Austin Hill going to be the driver they put over there? Because there's a lot of speculation as to Austin Hill. He will possibly be moving up as well. On that same note, speaking of Xfinity and if Daniel Hemric will move down there, well, HAAS Xfinity Series teams have announced their drivers, and it's going to be Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer. Sheldon Creed, I don't know if he wants this stat or not, but it's still a pretty decent stat. Most second place finishes of all time in the Xfinity Series without getting a win. I feel like Creed will eventually break through. Maybe he breaks through this year, maybe he breaks through with HAAS, but he's going to good equipment once again. And of course, you know what you get with Sam Mayer. He has wins in the Xfinity Series already, so it looks like a pretty stout lineup once again for the Haas Factory team, a championship level team. So hopefully both drivers go over there and flourish and get things done. And of course, to a lot of people, this puts to bed the rumors of several other drivers going over there to the Hos Xfinity Series team? Or does it? Because Xfinity Series, you can have as many teams as you want to. There's no cap on it, so Haas could run 3 or 4 teams. So these are 2 drivers Haas is going to have. Is Haas going to have more drivers, or is this it? That's another question that can be asked. And a few odds and ends before we close this thing out here. RFK looking like the lead candidate to get the Kroger sponsorship. So RFK might get Kroger, and if they get that, they are expected to have another charter to go with it. And which driver they would put up there is up for a lot of speculation. Maybe Riley Herbst. His name has been tossed around a lot. Riley Herbst to RFK or Riley Herbst to 2311. You hear that a lot. So it will be interesting to see what happens over there with that deal, if it all comes through and pulls out. But that's the big rumor right now, that Kroger is going to RFK, and RFK is going to get that extra charter, so we'll have to see how it all plays out. And the story that will not end, the one that has polarized the NASCAR community for weeks now, Austin Dillon, his appeal hearing will be had on Wednesday. We don't know who the judges or anything like that are yet, the panel or whatever you want to call it, who they're going to be yet, but that will happen Wednesday, so hopefully Wednesday or Thursday we will have some news, and we will finally put that to bed over there with the with Spingate, Richmond Gate, whatever you want to call it. And finally, have to end this off on a bit of a sad note. We lost Scott Bloomquist. He was flying his airplane, his vintage airplane, one of his hobbies that he really enjoyed. And not much more I can say that hasn't already been said. Kenny Wallace has a really good video explaining his thoughts on Scott Bloomquist, and he was much more into the dirt scene than I will ever be. So go check out Kenny Wallace's video if you want like a fuller appreciation thing. But here's the only thing I can say as far as Scott Bloomquist goes. He kind of made dirt late models a thing that you pay attention to, where dirt late models were never sort of a premier thing that you watched back in the day before Bloomquist. The sprint cars, the winged cars always had precedent, at least with my friend group. That's what they went to go watch. But Scott Bloomquist, he brought attention to that sport. And the only thing I can really compare it to is John Force, funny cars. Nobody really paid attention to funny cars. It was on the docket and some people enjoyed it, but it was never as big a spectacle before John Force got into a funny car. It was always Top Fuel dragsters, at least like I said with my friend group. Top Fuel dragsters got the bigger deal. Same thing with the wing sprint cars. So the only thing I can compare Bloomquist to is John Force, because he took a division and raised it to a level and made people care about it. And he was just, even if you didn't know about dirt, you probably have heard of his name before. And not only that, he's just such a big personality, which is why he elevated. Same thing with John Force. They just had such big personalities that they elevated a division, we'll say in this case, that most people didn't pay attention to before they got there, and they built a whole division around it. So unfortunate, rest in peace, and hopefully his family can come to peace with it and all that, because this is a big one. There's not many names as big as Scott Bloomquist, and it's unfortunate that we lost him. All right, that's all I got for you on this one. If you made it this far, I would love to have your subscription. If not, I'll just keep making these things. If you've got a question, comment, or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section. I get to as many of them as I can. And other than that, thanks for your time. Peace. Merch store. Link is in the description if you want to help out the channel. The merch store is links in the description. I just said that.